Thank you, Vanessa and Megan, and welcome everybody. On behalf of the extended ecoAmerica community, thank you for joining us at the 9th Annual American Climate Leadership Summit. Our theme this year is the solution set for climate change: ambition, restoration, and justice. We're in the climate endgame right now. The next few years, we have to make a big difference, and we need a reset. The fantastic experts that we have today and on the next 3 Thursday afternoons are going to show us the way. This is a different world right now. The pandemic, unemployment, racism, they're disrupting everything. Millions of us are getting needlessly sick and losing our jobs. Tens of thousands of us are dying. And our right to vote is being threatened now, just before the most important election in our lifetime. So the first reset we need is to really understand this as a climate emergency. Wars, pandemics, recessions, they're all relatively short-term. We suffer, we solve them, we move on. Climate change is different. We can't just pump money into the economy, sign a treaty, or invent a vaccine, and a few years later the problem is gone. All the carbon we have been accumulating up in the atmosphere for the past century or so is still there, changing the temperature and chemistry of our air and waters. A decade ago, climate change was something that was going to happen in the future, 2030, 2050, 2100. But today, with all the records that are being set in fires and floods and droughts, climate change is here now, and it's happening so broadly that it's hardly even considered news anymore. So climate change is a physics problem, not just a social problem. And as we move from a situation that's difficult to fix to one that's becoming irreversible, with consequences so dramatic that they're impossible to overstate, we need to start focusing on solutions. So the second reset we need is on climate solutions. There's no doubt that we can still fix the physics problem. There's actually a higher degree of certainty in climate solutions than there was 5 or 10 years ago. Consider utility scale energy in America. A decade ago, all of the utility energy was coal and natural gas. Today, we're retiring more coal and natural gas than we're building, and 100% of all the new energy is coming from renewables. Coal and natural gas just can't compete. They're going bankrupt. Consider transportation. A decade ago, there was no electric car industry. Today, Tesla is the most valuable car company in the world. Tesla is showing us that electric cars are safer, cleaner, faster, and soon cheaper than gasoline-powered cars. What about heavy industry, like concrete and steel? What about aviation? Yes and yes. We can electrify those and use renewable energy, or we can use biofuels and offset the remaining emissions. We do need to take carbon out of the system at scale to restore planetary and human health. We have natural solutions that we know work already, and the industrial solutions to remove carbon are about to become a $1 trillion business. So we absolutely have all the money and resources that we need to save ourselves and the planet. We'll end up costing us less, we'll have healthier lives, and we'll solve other problems. And as COVID-19 has shown us, we can act quickly and at scale to solve our problems. The third reset we need is to understand that climate change is not a separate problem that can be solved in isolation. Our climate, public health, economic, democratic crises, they're all intertwined, rooted in a systemic injustice that benefits a few at the expense of many. There is a concentration of wealth and power among a tiny elite that does not care about or adequately invest in public health, public education, equal opportunity, and equal rights. They're on autopilot, amassing more wealth and power as they justify the inequities in America and around the world. This indiscriminate libertarianism, the accumulation of wealth and inhibiting government at the expense of society and the planet, is at the root of all of our economic, social, and environmental problems today. As we watch government bail out business and banks for the second time in little more than a decade, many of us still believe that government is bad. Those same people, though, depend on government for infrastructure, for security, and for an educated workforce. They don't acknowledge the public subsidy that they benefit from or the adequate taxes that they should pay. Things like the Green New Deal show us the way forward. They have the urgency, the scale, and the systemic change we need to solve climate change. And anything that we do that solves for racism, health and income disparities, and environmental problems helps solve climate change. Anything that we do to solve for climate change helps with all those other fundamental challenges. The fourth reset we need is ourselves. There's a key strategy of the polluters and the climate deniers to try to disempower us. They tell us that whatever we do, it doesn't make any difference. They'll tell us as individuals, as organizations, and a nation, we just don't make any difference. The exact opposite is true. Like pandemics and wars, each of us have a role to play. We all have to do our part. We have to be an example for others. We have to advocate for solutions. You see that leadership emerging all across America. In the faith communities, you see the Episcopal Church, the AME Church, the American Baptist Church, the Jewish traditions, the United Church of Christ, the Disciples of Christ. They're all making the connection between creation care and climate change and showing us the way forward. In health, Kaiser Permanente, the American Public Health Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Psychological Association, just to name a few, leading the way, showing us how climate change impacts our health. In communities, big and small, you see mayors stepping up, often way ahead of their states and of the nation. And in the business world, from BlackRock to Bezos, from Microsoft to Apple, businesses are starting to move the right direction. I want to do a special shout out here to Microsoft, which has made a commitment to go 100% clean by 2030 and remove all their historical emissions by 2050. That model, widely emulated, saves the world. All across America, climate concern has doubled in the past 5 years. 5 years ago, 27% of us said that we were very concerned. Today, that number is 54%. And overall, 79% of us say that we are concerned about climate change. The youth in America are leading us all. Sunrise, Extinction Rebellion, School Strike, Zero Hour, Power Shift, Future Coalition. The kids in America understand that the future is in jeopardy and it's their future. They're getting out in the streets, they're pushing, they are leading us. So we all need to redouble our efforts ourselves to address climate change. We can make a huge difference. Now is the time. So what do we do now? Same thing. Ambition, restoration, justice. We need to move from mitigation to greater ambition. Our goals are far too weak and far too far away. We need 100% clean energy by 2030 or 2035, not 2040 or 2050. And we need to start taking carbon out of the system at scale with natural and industrial means as fast as we can. There is no such thing as overreacting to climate change. We also need to move from adaptation to restoration. Healthy nature can restore itself and restore the planet. We have to help it by stopping polluting, restoring our forests and water, and the biggest thing that we have to do is just stop burning. The third thing, we have to move from just transition to justice. Of course, we need to help all the workers and communities that are being displaced by the transition to clean energy, but we need a broader definition of justice. We need to take care of health and education disparities, racism, and embed justice in everything that we do. We need to lead by example. We need to advocate in our personal lives, in our workplace, in our communities, and with policymakers for solutions that make a difference. And we all need to vote. There could be nothing more important in the next 3 or 4 months than getting out the vote. I have to admit that even me, climate change is not my number one priority. There are 3 little people, Ellie, Jackson, and Anderson. They call me Grandbob, who are the most important things in my life. I'd drop anything to help them. You're probably the same. We all have families. Climate change might not be your number 1 issue, but it should be your number 2 or 3 issue, because climate change is going to harm everything else on your list. Every day, everything we do, let's think about climate change and make a difference. We all can lead. We all can make a difference. Let's get started with the American Climate Leadership Summit. I'll be right there, Naomi.